Let's talk about business connectivity. Business connectivity means that I want to be able to access external data. And there's all sorts of ways that we can do this. We have external lists, we will identify the external content type, and then this is going to go through our business data connectivity services, and now we're able to grab that external data and be able to view it. So a lot of good information here. Now there's two ways that we can do this. You can do this with central administration and integrated list management, and this also allows us to use the SharePoint Designer. If we want to go through and we can create this, or we can use Visual Studio if you want something a little bit bigger, but you don't have to go through and directly modify XML files to be able to pull this in. Visual Studio allows us to have external content types, and once we've created these, we can view the data inside of our normal SharePoint. We don't have to go through and have something custom built and all this fragile back-end stuff. It makes it very easy. You can share them with external lists. You can have searching, Outlook, Word, SharePoint Workspace, InfoPath, Access, Excel, third-party applications, all of that. The good thing about it is it abstracts the data. What does that mean? It means that the users don't know, don't care, don't have to know, don't have to care where the data is coming from. They just want the information. They don't care if it's on server 5 or it's on a completely different company that we're pulling in the information to be able to do this. Of course, your backend data source has to allow you to access it. It's not like I can go in and use Designer and grab all the business specs from a competitor. You still have the permissions, and that's one of the areas that you run into problem. You have to have SharePoint permission access, but you also have to have permission access to the external database. So you are going to have to work, and you can do federation services or something like that, or duplicate user IDs or service accounts or something that allows you to go in and change it. Now, the cool part about it is that I can make it in partnership with the external company. I can make it so that not only is it viewable, it's also editable. So if I'm working with a manufacturer and we have widgets, and this is our stock that's bound, with just-in-time delivery, I can go in and on my SharePoint site, I can bump up the number of deliverables that we need. And it's not only reflected in my SharePoint site, but it's pulling the data directly into the database, which I just updated from my SharePoint site. Of course, this assumes that you have the appropriate permissions to make these modifications. But it's actually pretty easy to do this. They have an exercise that we're going to do, and it's going to use the AdventureWorks database, and if you want to follow along and do it on your own virtual machines, you can. They give you links over on page 355 on how to download the sample database. Make sure you grab the right one, otherwise the exercise isn't going to work really well for you. So let's go out, and we will go to my little site. We're going to go into the DougCo site. Oops, wrong one. DougCo. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a list in our navigation page on the DougCo site that points to data from an external database. Now, it happens to be on this server, but the process is the same. It's the same. So all you're doing is you're pointing it to this database as opposed to this database, and you actually have to give it a path to be able to find that information. What we're going to do is we're going to go in and use SharePoint Designer. SharePoint Designer is a neat little app that allows me to go in and I can hook in data, I can put in graphics, I can do all sorts of neat things. My Doug site is really small. It's just a document center. But what I want to do is I want to be able to add a list that has access to those external components. So we're going to go into our site actions, and what we're going to do is we're going to bring in the SharePoint Designer. Inside of the SharePoint Designer, we're going to go and bring in external content types. Now again, make sure that you have the appropriate permissions to be able to gain access to this particular data. So we'll bring up our SharePoint Designer, and what we're going to do is we're going to, it's opening some information here. So we'll give it a moment, making sure all the pieces and parts and bits are there. And we're going to go in and select our external content types as soon as it allows us to do this. So communicating, since I'm working on virtual machines and it's not a production server, it's not the fastest thing in the universe, because I have memory constraints and I'm doing all sorts of things. So we're going to go and do external content types, And then inside of here, we're going to select the particular external content type button as soon as it pops up. Come along, little server. We know you can do it. And we'll give it just a moment. Dun, dun, dun. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab the contacts from the AdventureWorks. So we're going to select external content types. So we'll say external content type. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create a brand new one. So we'll say new external content type. And we're going to give it a name. We'll call this one ADVENTURE works contacts. We have to identify our sources. So we'll say that this is our, notice that we have the name that we did, and if we click off, it will go in and it'll update the name. And we're going to go in and we're going to discover our external data sources. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a connection. And these are the various types. We have a .NET type, but we also have SQL Server and WCF. We're going to go through and we're going to select a SQL Server. We have to put in the name of the database server, and it can be whatever, as long as I can locate it, using fully qualified domain names. But we're just going to say localhost. And we will give it a database name that we want, and this is going to be AdventureWorks, ADVENTUREWORKS. And notice that when you do the connection, we can do impersonation by saying connect with the user's identity. We can say with an impersonated user identity, and we would give it the secure store application ID if we want to use secure store service, or we can go through and do a custom identity. We're just going to say user identity. And what's going to happen is we are connecting up, and now we can go in and we can view our various tabs. So I'll click on AdventureWorks. We're going to drop in and look at the tables. And there's all sorts of different tables that are available for us. So we're going to do the contact table. And what I do is I right-click on it, and I'm going to say create all operations. That's going to put all the pieces together that allows us to go in and gain access into our system. Now, one of the problems that we may have is there may be just too much data in here. We may want to limit this out a little bit, and we can do that by modifying the properties. So we are inside the all operations. We'll say next. And these are the various data source elements that we have. Contact ID, first name, middle name, suffix, email address, all of that. And so right now I'm just going to take all of them, but we'll show you how to thin it out in just a little bit. And now I want to go in and I want to add a filter. Inside of our filter, what we're going to do is we are going to select add filter parameter. We'll say add filter, oops, I've already done that. We have the add filter parameter. And what I want to do is I want to change what this happens to be. So we have add filter parameter. Then we're going to click to add. So we'll drop this down, and I am going to be able to pick which particular parameter I want to have this pulled in as. And what we're going to do is we're going to say click to add. And inside we're going to say we want this to be a filter. We just have a regular filter. We can call it whatever we want. But what we're going to do is we're going to change the filter type to a limit. And what are we going to limit this out? We're going to go through and we're going to say I want to limit this to a particular number. And we're going to do this off a contact ID. We're going to thin that out. So what are we going to thin it out to? I'm going to change the value over here to 2,000. We're not going to pull in any more than 2,000 contacts per request, otherwise it may take a little while for us to go through and do that. So we'll hit finish, and now we have our brand new connection, and we want to be able to save this. So I'm going to hit save, and it is going to save it into our metadata store for us. And if you don't do that, what's going to happen is you go back and exit out of the designer, and all your changes are not going to be there. So we'll go ahead and close out of this. Now, what we did is we went through, and if we wanted to, we could go in and modify it. And we said 2,000. Well, here's a gotcha with the business connectivity services. By default, it does limit it to 2,001 rows. We can extend it, by going in and modifying the throttling settings. And they talk about this. You have to do that with PowerShell. They show you how to do this on a little web page from Microsoft over on page 359, so that you can change that if you want. In a database, you have rows per fetch is 2,000. Your timeout's 3 minutes. The maximum size is 30 meg, and you do that timeout in 3 minutes. And if you want to change that, you can go in and use PowerShell to say, hey, we want more stuff for the timeouts or whatever. So now I have the ability to access it, but I still don't have the link. So exercise 8.4 over on page 360, we're going to go ahead and set up our link. So we have our website. We're still at dougco.com. We're going to our site actions, and what we want to do is we want to go into more actions. And then what we're going to do is we're going to be in a create window. This is our create window, and we're going to select list over to the side. By the way, this nice little interface here, provided by Silverlight. If you don't have Silverlight installed, we'll talk about this a little bit later, it's going to be a nastier interface. So we went through and we said filter, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say external list. So we'll grab external list, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and we're going to go ahead and create it. And then we'll put in our title. We'll say ADVENTURE, AdventureWorks Contact List. And we can put in all sorts of descriptions and all of that. Do you want this in the quick launch? We'll go ahead and say yes. Now what we need to do is we need to get our external content type. So we're going to go in and we're going to say that it is our AdventureWorks Contact. Oh, we have to have our value to put this in. And we called that CONTACTS, contacts. So we'll grab that, see if it finds it. Doesn't find it. Let's go ahead and just pick it then. We're going to grab our AdventureWorks contacts. Here we go. And so we pulled that in, and now what we're doing is we're saying I want this to show up in the list section on the side of my home page, and this is where you go in and grab the data. So I'll hit create. And now we have an external list, once it goes through and creates it, that is going to show us all the information. Realize that it may not show you everything that you want right off the bat. And in fact, you may even get an error and it doesn't show you anything because you have access denied by business data connectivity. So what you may need to do is you may need to go in and set up your permissions. You know, I've gone in, I've created a brand new connection, and business data connectivity isn't allowing me in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and we will grab is this the right one? Nope, I want central administrator. I thought I had the central admin side up. Nope, we don't have the central admin side up. So let's go ahead and fire off central admin, and my little video thing may fall over for a moment. That's the challenge of navigating off a central admin. Then you have to go through the UAC and all the other pieces to make sure it's going to work, and then it has to do this and do that and change this and change that. But eventually our video will pop back up. So let me go over to this shot, then we'll go back to this shot, and we'll see if it has updated. And it has. So business data connectivity says, well, wait a minute, you don't necessarily have the appropriate permissions, so I need to go in and change the permissions. So we're going to go in and manage service applications. Inside of service applications, we're going to select our business data connectivity service. So we'll go in and we'll fire that off. And then what we're going to do is we're going to select our connection, which is our AdventureWorks contacts. I'm going to right-click on it, and I'm going to say set permissions. And by the way, these particular steps aren't in your book. And a lot of people have a very big problem with this because they're like, oh, I can't access it. Well, why can't you access it? Business data connectivity services doesn't have the appropriate permissions. In the config class, we go through it, but we never actually set up the connection in Designer Works. Here, we set it up in Designer, but we don't show you how to set permissions. So I'm showing you both ends of it. And what you'll do is you'll go in and you'll select the account. We're just going to make it easy. I'll just say everyone. And we'll check it. Make sure that it is a, oh, it's not in there. All right. We'll just grab it like this. We'll say all users, all authenticated users. That way it's not as open-ended that we wanted. So we'll go ahead and grab all authenticated users because we want everybody in our company to be able to access this. And here's the gotcha. If you have it here, that's not enough. You still have to add it. You still have to go through and add it. All authenticated users. Get rid of the everyone group. Come on. Backspace. There we go. Cool. We say add. It shows up. Notice the permissions. By default, you have nothing. So we're going to go ahead and beef it up. And then I'll say OK. So now we have the appropriate permissions. Now what I'll do is I'll go back in, and we are in our external connection. Here we go, AdventureWorks contact list. I will click off, go back to my my libraries here. We'll get into our AdventureWorks contact list. Now this assumes that we have the permissions in the SQL database. You need to make sure that you have the permissions, and now all of our stuff is populated. So you have to have two levels of permission here: business data connectivity and SQL Server. And I've already done the SQL Server stuff in the back end. Now the problem is it's going to give me 30, and there's a bunch of stuff in here that I really don't care about. Email promotion, what the heck is that? You know, do I need to go through and change that? So exercise 8.5, we're going to talk about customizing our external lists. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'll select the List tab. So here we go. Select the List tab. Inside the List tab, we're going to go into our Manage Views group, which is right here, and select Modify View. So I'm going to click on that. And what we're going to do is we're going to go in and identify the pages that we want. For example, I don't care about name style. I don't care about what your middle name is. I don't care about your suffix, even though it may be important to you. Email promotion, I don't care about that. And then all this password stuff, the salt, the hash, and hopefully the SQL database we're pulling off of is a little bit cleaner, and it doesn't have things like password salt that really shouldn't be exposed out. I can also get rid of this, get rid of this. I can identify where I want to sort it by. We're going to go ahead and sort it by our contact ID. And we can also have data source filters. I can filter stuff out. I can show all the items, or I can limit it out if I want to go through and do a filter. Let's go ahead and get into our limit, our item limit, because by default it's going to do 30. We're going to change that to a Hunsky. We'll make it 100 so that we can see all of these. And we'll say OK. So now you'll notice that we show a lot more data, and the data is a heck of a lot more relevant. Now let's go ahead and see if I can make a modification. So I want to go in and I want to, let's see, we'll do contact ID of 3. We have Kim Abercrombie. Kim Abercrombie. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover over this, get the little drop down, and I'm going to edit the item. So we're going to change Kim Abercrombie. She recently was able to do some nuptials, and we're going to change her name to Abercrombie, S-T-E-P-H-E-N-S, just like we have in our book. So I'm going to save it. And once it's saved, you'll notice that Kim Abercrombie is now Kim Abercrombie Stevens. Now that's in SharePoint. Oh, cool. But how do we know that that's in SQL? Well, let me fire off our SQL Server Manager. And inside of our SQL Server Management Studio, we're going to go in and we're going to look at the database. And this would be on the back-end server at our partner's database. We want to make sure that this was an actual update, not just something that we did inside of SharePoint. So we're going to go into our databases. We're going to grab our AdventureWorks database, and we're going to do a brand new query. And in our query, we're going to say select all, asterisk. Then we're going to say from PRSON contact, C-O-N-T-A-C-T, and we're going to say where the contact ID equals 3, because that was the contact ID that we used. And let's see if Miss Abercrombie Stevens now shows up. And there it is. So we were able to go in, pull the data from the external database, modify it in SharePoint, and then it was able to go in and update. Of course, you would want to go in and set your permissions just so that only what you want the people to be able to do is what they should be able to do.